Welcome to the Hopenning, the place where hope is happening, with your hosts Fran Cadron and Marina Theron-Monnery. For more information about Fran and Marina, or to apply to be a guest on the show, please go to our website www.hopenning.com. The Hopenning is for informal purposes only and is based on the research of your hosts, Fran and Marina. They, as well as their guests, are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from this podcast, which is not intended to replace any professional medical advice or care by medical professionals you are currently utilizing. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining Fran and Marina today on this 102nd episode of The Hopenning, the place where hope is happening. Today, we're starting in a new chapter where Fran and I will interview each other, and I have the honors today to interview Fran first. And what Fran wants to talk to us about today is habituation and dishabituation. So, Fran, as a rapid transformational therapy practitioner, I would love to hear when I saw you sent me this. I'm like, I am really curious about how you want to address this habituation and dishabituation. So the floor is all yours.
Well, Marina, I think that one of the reasons people come to us is because of habituation, which leads to change finally, right? So I'm going to ask you, Marina, what was the best day of your life?
Oh, I had a lot. I have many fantastic days of my life. The most recent was probably the day my grandson was born.
Mm, Yeah. And if you needed to ask me that, I would say probably the days my daughters were born, right? But if we had that day every day,
Mm, mm.
pretty soon it would not be the best day of your life anymore. Pretty
That's
soon,
interesting.
right?
Yeah.
Habituation is when we get used to the same stimulus so that our brain doesn't respond the way it did the first time.
Right.
And what is really interesting when I started doing this research is how I found it to be so true. I'm I've we've been to both of us have been traveling a lot, right? We've been to other places in the world. And when we leave Canada and then we come back, we appreciate. We appreciate what we have here. And I suppose it would be like that for anyone who's leaving their own country, to leave and then to come back and then to see again with a new set of eyes. That is dishabituation, to have a break from the normal and then return and see, okay, either I love it or I really hate it. And that is when change happens, is when we dishabituate. And dishabituating is essential for creativity, because if we stay with the status quo, nothing ever changes. When we dishabituate, when we get tired of something, when we get bored of it, when we get feeling like constricted, that is when creativity happens and change happens. And so both habituation and dishabituation are necessary for a healthy life. So I'm going to start with reading a quote, and I found this super interesting. The quote is, "If I was here for the last 18 years doing that all day, every day, it probably wouldn't still have pixie dust on it. But I go away and I miss it so much. Then I come back and it kind of re-sparkles." And this was written by a woman named Julia. So the authors of the book that I read, and the book is called Look Again: The Power of Noticing What Was Always There. And the authors are Tali Sharot and Cass R. Sunstein. So they interviewed two women, and the women are in their early to mid 50s. Both of them come from similar socioeconomic backgrounds. they have a comfortable lifestyle. They both have around the same number of kids. One of them had 2 children, one of them had 3. Both of them were in very loving marriages. They both lived in the United States in good communities. One of them was tired of her life, and her happiness level was quite low. The other was not happy with, like, she was happy with her life, but there was reasons. There were reasons. Everything that we would, you know, begin to think would be the reason: money, prestige, power, love, extended relationships, family, all of that stuff was very similar. But what they did found was the woman named Julia was Julia Roberts. So we know Julia Roberts. She's a movie star, right? And she often leaves home to travel for movies, for events, for whatever. When she comes back to her home, she immerses herself in it. She says it's like pixie dust, like someone has sprinkled pixie dust where she is. Everything looks new again. Everything feels brighter. Whereas the other woman didn't move, didn't leave, didn't travel, was always doing the same thing with her family. And so the authors began the book in that way. In order to become dishabituated, we need to change things up. We need to provide things that are new and different. Otherwise, our happiness level goes down. So, Marina, what do you think would happen if I gave you $100 right here and now?
What would happen? I would question you why.
Just because you're my friend and I would give you $100. How would you
Um,
feel?
I would feel kind of wow, what a surprise. That's
Right?
unexpected.
Right?
Yeah.
How about if I gave you another $100 tomorrow?
Well, if it continues, I would start to expect it.
That's right. And so the researchers wanted to look at that. They wanted to look at the timeline of when we begin to habituate, where things are how long it takes for things to become routine and not novel anymore. And it was 5 days. So the
Mm,
first day, it's like
interesting.
wow, this is so exciting. Second day, because it was just $5, right? $5.
Yeah.
There's $5. Wow, look at that. I can
I know
buy.
you said 100. You said a
I know
100.
for you,
Oh, for
I
me.
would give
Okay.
you 100. But the
Okay.
researchers gave $5.
Oh, okay.
Five
Understand.
dollars.
Yeah.
Yes. So for the first $5, it was wow, I can buy myself a Starbucks. I can buy whatever. Second day, thank you. Third day, wow, that's nice. Fourth day, Fifth day, their happiness level came back down to where it was before.
Mm,
So
mm,
even though they were still getting the $5, their happiness level of the people who received the money was back at base level happiness as where it was before they got the money, even though they were still able to buy the Starbucks every day or whatever they wanted
mhm.
to choose to spend their money on. Their happiness level came down. And the research again looked at holidays. So we've all been on holidays. We love holidays. Where do you think the happiness level spikes during the holiday? The best time of the holiday is.
It's
Researchers
probably
looked
the
at
day you
that.
arrive.
Very close. It's
Yeah.
hour 43.
And
Hour
interesting.
43. So that's not even 2 days. So for the first while, we're all excited, we land, we look, there's a palm tree, lovely. And we get off with our baggage, we find our hotel, and our happiness level continues to rise as we learn where to go in the hotel, where the restaurants are, and, look to see what there is to see. At hour 43, our happiness level peaks. And then it's downhill from there. And it might be a downhill slide or it might be a crash, whatever, which is super interesting because when I think of people that go on extended holidays, and myself, one of them, pretty soon you get bored of, and I hate to say this, but you get bored of seeing the same, like castles, even though, I mean, the first time you see a castle, it's amazing. Second time, third time. But by the
Right.
time you've seen the fourth castle, it's like, and you
Yeah,
just want to do something different.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
it's
Hmm.
human nature. It's human nature because the brain stops responding to things that don't change. It's our human survival mechanism. So, if I were to ask you, Marina, do you have do you have an idea? Do you have a situation that you can think of that would make your brain respond quickly
Oh.
and like
Um,
like an event?
anything like if my let's say my son calls me and say that my grandson is sick, can I go picking him up from daycare? He's on the other side of the city. I would jump into action. I would quickly call clients and reschedule and yeah. So the I mean, I tend to live kind of in hypervigilance anyway because of my childhood. So it's I can act very fast. So, but that would be one. And for example, let's say the fire alarm goes off,
Mhm,
I would jump.
mhm. And that's survival mechanisms, right?
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
Our primal brain, our primitive brain, responds to stimuli that is different, that it threatens existence. So the fire alarm, your grandson being sick, the smell of smoke, those types of stimuli, your brain will quickly respond to because it's different. So for me, when I'm driving on the highway and it's all trees, 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 if I see a little bit of movement, right, in the ditch, my brain automatically goes to that movement
Right.
because it could be a deer, it could be a moose, it could be something that I have to respond to quickly. But otherwise, I do not see the trees. I'm
Right.
not seeing every individual tree. I'm not seeing because our brain gets used to things that don't change. So, because of that, we end up with situations where racism, discrimination, prejudice, uh, you know, one of the most hideous genocidal crimes of history was the Holocaust. And we can look back on that and say, why wasn't something done? Why was that allowed? How could they get away with that? But the answer is simple. It happened gradually,
Yeah. It's like
right?
boiling the frog.
Right. Just like
Hmm.
boiling the frog. So if you introduce change very gradually, very slowly, people habituate to it. And so at first it might be a little odd. We think things are a little odd, but we habituate and habituate until atrocities are happening under our nose, but we've habituated to it. And so days go on. We continue to go to work. We continue to have kids and raise them. We continue to do our regular lifestyle where right underneath our nose, stuff is happening. So habituation can be very good because we don't want to see every tree when we're driving down the highway. And every time we hear about your grandson being sick, you don't want to jump into cortisol mode, right? Because it might be just a sniffle. It might be just something that he picked up at daycare and he's going to be over by in 2 days. But the things that are potentially life-threatening, we we react to it because it's big, it's a big change. And so the problem with habituation is, and we see this all the time in our practice, when people get used to feeling a certain way. So for you and I, who again, you talked about it, about being hypervigilant. So something happened in your childhood, right? That have has made you now hypervigilant. And you might want to go into that right now, Marina, just briefly. What caused hypervigilance in your adulthood? I mean, you're in your 50s now. And you haven't lived at home since you were
Mhm.
17 or 18? Well, what, why is that? What
Yeah, I left
happened?
when I was 22. Um, I grew up with a very explosive father, and I always say it was like living on a time bomb because he would, when he is calm and at peace, you hold your breath, you don't trust it, because anything can set him off. And then when he does explode, it was just brace yourself. And so I became two things. I became an empath because I read people like a X-ray machine, and I became very hypervigilant, always being very aware of people's moods around me and reading them. For that reason, I really don't like groups of people. I like to hang out with individuals. When a group becomes too big, it's very hard for me. So that is why I'm hypervigilant. I always would be on the lookout, and I would try when I could just see the way he would walk, and I would know we're gonna have trouble today. And I would try to run to him and put my arms around him and say, I love you, to see if I could kind of diffuse the situation. And it didn't always work. But so just always be on, always be aware, especially of other people and their emotions and their moods and their body language a lot. And so, yeah, that's
Yeah.
it in a nutshell.
Yes. And children do that because a child's survival depends upon their primary attachment figures, right? So the mother, father, your survival as a child depended on your parents. And so in your child's brain, daddy, daddy, if dad's in a good mood, I'm safe. If dad's in a bad mood, I am not safe. So I will do whatever I can to put daddy in a good mood because locus of control, their magical thinking, right? A child's locus of control is I am responsible for making my daddy happy because reptile brain, primal brain says, I have to do that in order to survive. And so as children, we learn that. We learn to read the situation. When is it safe? When is it not safe? But the thing is, our brains are continually flooded with cortisol and it changes the way our brain develops. And so, yes, our brains are different. Those of us that were raised in an environment where it potentially sometimes because of an explosive parent or because of a parent that was distracted or not there or addicted or whatever, we grow up differently. And so our adulthood, I hate to say the scars, but it's like a scar, bear the scar of our childhood. So in that situation, you habituated to knowing to read your father. And so at that time, that was the way you survived. But in our adulthood, often if we habituated in that type of a situation, we will choose a partner who continues that pattern.
Right.
So
Exactly.
right? We continue the pattern, and there's lots of different reasons behind that. But the problem is in adulthood, um, we end up not maybe you or me, but battered wives. So, battered wives syndrome. So, we end up getting used to yelled at, screamed at, maybe hit, maybe swore at, denied, all kinds of things that happen to battered women. And because of habituation, we get used to it and it's the same stimulus, the same stuff every day. We get used to it. And then, there'll be that one time it goes too far and your brain will say this is enough. Survival mode kicks in and gets the wife out of there, but it could be a long, long time. Like I
Mhm.
forget what the data is right now, Marina. Maybe you are a little bit better on the data, but it's many, many times. I think it's like
And
30.
for women or people in abusive
Yes.
marriages, it takes them 7 times to
Yes.
attempt to leave until they do.
Right? 7 times to attempt to leave, but how many times were they? I think 37 times. I think the average is 37 times they were hit or beaten.
I'm not sure of that statistics now.
Yes. It's crazy, right? But that's habituation. So, um, you know, we can talk about that more, but I'd
But
like to talk about,
I want to revisit that a little bit, Fran, because I think you touched on something that's important because when you grow up in that environment, it is habituation. So because of that habituation, a lot of times you choose the life partner who
yes,
treats you in exactly the same way. So you continue that. So I think that's quite important. And that's why we would see that a lot of times women marry people who are just like their fathers.
yes,
And that's the reason why. And sometimes
yes,
it works out great, sometimes not.
yes. And if your mother was the person who was explosive and you had to walk on eggshells around, you can also marry the partner which might be have the personality of your mother.
Right.
So it's you know, I hate to say these kinds of things because it's like, oh, I feel bad for the kids, right, that are out there
Hmm. Hmm.
because they're just trying to survive. And then, I guess eventually they will learn, but sometimes it's far, far into adulthood.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, sometimes we perpetuate as moms, right? So super interesting. When I looked at the data, it talked about Sweden. And, whenever we hear about Sweden, we hear about, one of the most happiest countries in the world. And, they do all the things right. So back in the 1960s, Marina, they did something and changed the traffic, and automatically, like that, there was a 40% decrease in the amount of accidents in the
Interesting.
1960s. Yes. Well, we
My
always think of
question though is that they maintain that
good question. No. But what they
because it
did,
became habit.
it became a habit. So what
Yeah.
they did was they changed the side of the road that people
Right.
drove on. They wanted to become more like the other countries, and so they changed. And I can't remember if they changed to the right-hand side of the road or the left-hand side, but they
Yeah.
changed. Automatically, the accidents went down. And you would think if you change the traffic pattern, it's going to be chaos. There's going to be so many accidents, so many more accidents. But it didn't because people became hyper vigilant.
I focused. Right. Attention.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
So when I know now, oh my goodness, if I usually drive on the right-hand side of the road and now I have to drive on the left-hand side of the road, I'm
Right.
going to slow down. I'm going to be checking in my mirrors. I'm going to be hyper vigilant. Maybe I won't automatically let my teenage child who just got their driver's license and drive the car until everybody in the car has habituated to driving on the opposite side of the road. And then gradually, just like you said, the accident rate went back up
Right.
when people habituated,
So it's
which
probably lack of attention then as well, because the moment they became used to it, and I mean, you and I both know, Fran, we can drive from point A to point B, thinking about so many other things that consciously we wonder, how did I get here? And because we're so used to driving that same route, whether it's going to work or place that you frequently visit, it becomes habit. You don't have to think. And
it
today,
becomes
even
habit.
more so. Um, I'm sitting with mine in my lap. Google Maps. We don't
Mhm.
have to think, even though Google Maps have led me astray before. But I just, if I need to go to a new address, I don't think anymore. I let somebody else think for me.
The brain loves what's easiest.
Yeah.
The brain loves conserving energy.
Right.
And so, in order to memorize a route, it takes energy. In order to memorize phone numbers, how many phone numbers do you know by heart, Marina?
Oh my gosh, I think at this moment maybe five.
Yeah, I think I know
And I
3,
used to know so many.
right? Yeah. And so habituation, I
Yeah.
mean, it's what the brain does to conserve energy. And so what we need to do in our lives is make more variety, right? We need to bring variety into our life. So if we've got um, lots of good happening, okay. So you go to the most beautiful restaurant, you and Wayne, it's Valentine's Day. You go to the beautiful restaurant, there's a sparkling lake outside, and it's just like candles, and you've got like the best spot, beautiful music in the background. You're there for, 3 hours, say, at the restaurant. What do you think you could do in order to make that experience right from 0 to the end of 3 hours just as wonderful it was as when you first came into the restaurant and looked around and said, Wayne, this is the most amazing restaurant. What could you do?
Okay, what would I do? I think to go to a new restaurant and not one that I'm used to, number one. Number two, to sit in a spot that I wouldn't usually sit in, to order a meal that I would not usually order, to order a wine I would not usually order, to order a dessert I don't usually order. Anything I left
Yes,
out?
all those are all wonderful. Plus, get up every so often, go see what the rest of the restaurant looks like, where the other people might be sitting, where it's loud, noisy, maybe uncomfortable seats just
Mhm.
use the washroom, go up to the bar, see the restaurant from a different point of view for a moment, and then go back to your seat.
It's interesting, Fran, because it makes me think a little bit. We had a lake house. You visited me there,
Yes,
and we decided to sell it, and a lot of people questioned why, because we got very used to it. It
yes,
wasn't that special anymore, and we decided for a period of time. We are renovating our house right now, and we are also going on different trips. And it won't be forever. It's going to be a period of time, and then we may buy something again, may not. We don't know. But it's interesting because we did not have as much pleasure out of that as we would have if we were not so used to going there, if it wasn't such a habit.
that's right. Or during COVID, you spent many months there, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they found that during COVID as well. Um, People that habituated to working at home, like we are right now, they did not want to go back in.
Oh no. Yeah, there are still people who don't who are resisting that.
Yes, I mean, there's multiple reasons for that, but one could be being able to sit with your pajama bottoms on all day, right? I mean,
Mhm.
and to, have your own coffee and have your own fridge. And I mean, there's those types of reasons, but there's also the habituation that they became comfortable at home, and to leave the house became more of a chore. No, they had been leaving the house 5 days a week before that to drive, whatever amount of time to their office job and come home. And it didn't matter nothing, right?
Right.
They got habituated to that. But when they habituated to working at home, they didn't want to change that again. So in different ways, COVID either changed things up for the better or maybe not so much. And so
Um,
what
but Fran, in all of this, how much does attitude play a role in all of this?
But you have to be aware, right?
Right.
If you can
Because
be aware,
you and I talk a lot about gratitude, right?
yes,
And sometimes, we focus a lot on what we do not have. And this is an exercise I do for myself, even, and I'm going to go back to something you said earlier. After a few days on a holiday, you miss home. Well, I have to be honest, I went to Mexico recently and it was -20 in Calgary.
mm,
And I was walking on the beach this morning. It was plus 30. It was beautiful. It was fantastic. And when a plane came in that night and I saw this dead white city, I was like, oh no. And then I told myself, snap out of it, Marina. And what do you have to be grateful for in this city? And I have a lot. So it's changing by will my attitude about what I have in my life. So how important do you think just changing attitude in the things
It,
that you do not see as valuable anymore is
yeah,
important?
we have to become aware, right? If we're aware of our habitual thinking, our biases, right? If we're aware of our biases, then we can work to change our biases. But if we we need to be self-aware in
Hmm.
order to change our thinking. If we can become self-aware, and if I can say, Fran, give your head a shake, right? It's minus 20, but look at the sky. Look at that beautiful blue sky. Because that's another thing that the authors of this book touched on was air pollution. So they took a group of people who lived in some of them, I forget where it was, Mexico City, or one of the most polluted, air polluted cities of the world. And they looked at their happiness and whether, whether air pollution um, affected their mental health. And it didn't. It didn't. But then they took those same people and put them in a clean air chamber so that they could breathe fresh oxygen and experience that as over time, like maybe 5 days in a row. They would take them and put them in a clean air chamber and then go back and experience. And then they felt, they saw, they smelled, they really noticed the difference in the quality of the air that they were breathing. So when you see something different and you come back, that's when change happens. That's when people are motivated to make a change. So if we don't, if we, it's the gradual. If we are not paying attention, we become so habituated that we don't appreciate. But when we have a change and then we can look back on the other situation, we can say, thank God I'm not in that anymore. Or if I am still in that, I'm going to do something to change it. So the authors looked at lying in children. So, I mean, most children tell these little stories, right? Tell little
Yeah.
stories, the little events of whatever, they embellish or they just make up little events, right? The authors looked at that and said, if a child continually embellishes, makes up, um, fantasizes, and all of that, what happens later in their life?
It's become habit and they are become perpetual liars.
It's true. I mean, that's what they found. And it's like, oh my God. Um, because I know when I was a small child, if you wanted your way about something, right? With my little brain that wanted whatever it was, I would lie. I did because that's how I got what I wanted to have. But it can become perpetual lying. It can.
It's
And so,
interesting because I don't know about you, but have you ever encountered a client who goes back to a scene where they started to embellish the truth?
no, not,
I've had
I
it a
haven't.
few times, especially in situations where they would go into a boarding school and they don't feel they belong. So, for example, if it's a boarding school and they got it on a bursary or a scholarship, and it's a very posh school, and they got it in by merit,
Yeah.
and then all the other kids talks about their parents' fancy cars, their yachts, their planes, and this child doesn't have that. So a lot of times they start to embellish in order to fit in. That's a very interesting thing.
And yes, I have experience of that as well. And sometimes it's sometimes it's a reason for why we do things, right? So
Yeah.
if I did something that I'm not so proud of, I will lie. I might lie, but if I say that lie enough times,
You believe it.
I believe the lie. And so it becomes like truth to me, even though it was not true. It was a lie that I repeated in my brain so many times that I believe I would swear on a stack of Bibles that it was true. So our clients are like that too, right? I mean, human nature. So it's all interesting. One more thing that the authors talked about was social media.
Mhm.
And
Oh my
we,
gosh. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
we talk about this a lot on our show about how neither of us, you nor me, listen to the news. We don't. And
Right.
I have friends that go, well, siblings that will be like, Fran, how can you not listen to the news? How can you be so whatever, fill in the blank, and not listen to the news? And I say quite simply, because it does nothing for me.
Right.
And Marina, why don't you listen to the news?
I hate the infliction of constant fear, the embellishment of a lot of things just to put me in a state of fear. I hate that. I'm not going to allow that. So I have much better things to do with my time. Instead of watching news, I meditate. I avoid it. I do get headlines on my phone. I get email headlines. So if there's something major happening, I am aware of it. I don't go sit on CNN for hours to watch a tragedy happen. I've done that many years ago, but I don't like the energy.
Yeah. And my daughters and I, in 2001, after the World Trade Centers went down, and I watched TV all night. The same thing. I
Correct.
watched it
Yeah.
all night
Yeah.
long and went to work the next day. Why? Because it was riveting. It was the same
Hmm.
stuff, but it
Hmm.
was so fear-based. I needed to know.
No, it's life altering, right?
It was life altering. And anyone at that point, well, if you were to ask anyone where they were when 9/11
Right.
happened, they would be able
Right.
to tell you.
Right.
I mean, that's an event that's embellished in our brain.
Hmm.
But I
Hmm.
knew how detrimental it was to myself. My kids were asleep in their bed. I was awake. And so at that point, I considered maybe it's time to have no more TV because I can't control this myself.
Right.
I can't
Right.
control it. So the only thing that I can control is to get rid of the TV. And the girls and I talked about, and they were little, they were like 10 and 8, and they supported me. They were like, Mom, we can do this. And so we did. At the turn of the next year,
Interesting.
2002, no more TV. And we were just fine. We survived.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe it put them on a different trajectory in their lives too. It certainly did for me. But the authors of this book say the benefits that we would get if we gave ourselves a month of no social media are incredible. So no
And
Facebook,
talk
no
about social
Instagram.
media. How easy is it? For example, today, um, there are a lot of apps on the phone. I know that Snapchat has one. I've never been on Snapchat, but if you take a photo of yourself, you can put a filter on and it makes you look younger and it makes you look less wrinkly and it makes your lips look perfect. And you can change the contour of your face and you can add high cheekbones and big eyelashes and perfect eyebrows. You are able to do that all with software today. So what is social media stealing from us
Oh,
in that sense? Because I know people who have profiles like that, and it pains me because they've never learned to make peace with who they really are. It's okay.
and I believe that there will be a point that the pendulum swings back, where real people will be more beautiful than the embellished, photoshopped
Right.
people. I believe that. I believe the pendulum will come back. But in the meantime, Marina, look at how many young women are are in anxiety, in depression, in all types of mental health disorders because of social media. And I'm not talking about just bullying, because there's so much bullying that goes on as well, right? School age kids, junior high, senior high, the bullying that goes on in social media is terrible. Like suicide rate of young people it has gone up incrementally because of bullying on social media. But I'm looking at the happiness level of people, and yet it's so addictive. It's so addictive to scroll through and check and check and check. How many likes do I have? How many followers do I have? How many, that little ping of dopamine that we get every time
And
we can see
attention.
the attention we get. I'm likable, I'm worthy, I'm important, people like me, right? And if you have a developing brain where it's your developing brain is telling you your survival, right? Your survival is dependent upon whether people like you, whether people think you're worthy, whether people will keep you in their tribe. So way back when we were still tribal people, it was important to stay in a tribe for your own survival. Well, when you have a developing brain, you're still back. Your primal brain is still thinking, I need to be in the tribe. I need to I need to have people like me, because if I get kicked out of the tribe, I will die outside the tribe. And so, as adults who didn't grow up on social media, we have that advantage. And so, we are the ones that should be looking at that and saying, too much, this is too much. It is destroying a generation of children, because these children are going to grow up thinking they're not good enough, because
Yeah,
they don't have the big
right,
lips, they don't have the sculpted face, they don't have what this person who
right,
just used the
right.
filters uses.
Now
So
it's sad that reality. I think it's you who told me that if you ask children in school today what do they want to become one day, a lot of them says influencers.
yes,
Yeah. And at the end of the day, let's go back to basics. You and I both know that our biggest job is to guide people to self-love.
yeah, yeah. And if we can do that, it's hard to compete against social media, Marina.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a generation, not quite a generation, I would say, for 12 years. Okay, so maybe one whole group of children moved up through the school system where phones were allowed in the classroom, starting in junior high. In junior high, all the way up through high school. So children had access to their phone right beside them for 6 years. And that was damaging, because those children, okay, we've got a teacher up there who's trying to teach, algebra, or I've got whatever app. I've got Instagram, I've got Facebook, I've got texting ability to the girl who's sitting in the chair beside me, right? And so we've got a distracted generation who's coming
We
up.
do, and to me, it's almost like we are breeding a generation of attention deficit
Yes,
children because
yes.
they don't just sit down and eat a meal. They sit down and eat a meal while holding an iPad. So they don't learn how to focus on just being present with what they are doing.
Yeah. And I know we might sound like, oh, here we go again, the old
Yeah.
talk about social media. However, just like you said, if we are continually distracted, if we are continually looking at something that is not real, it's
Hmm.
not real. It's it's there so that you can buy a product, or that you can get some kind of something done to your face
Hmm.
or your breasts or whatever, right? To make you more appealing, to make you more
Right.
lovable. Then I sell product. And
Or to make
so,
somebody else like you more.
right, right. And so, social media, if we can give, like now, finally, most schools are waking up. Most. There are still schools who are not, and are allowing phones in the classroom beside the student. And uh, whatever, it's up to us, the voter, right, to change the system until we become so that breaking point where we say enough is enough. It's time to change the system. The
Right.
system is going to remain the way it is.
Right.
And so habituation and dishabituation both are necessary, but both can become a detriment to our
Yeah.
happiness levels
Right.
and our survival. Yeah. And so the last thing I want to talk about is um, discrimination. And so back in the 60s, when in the United States, when there was so much discrimination, right? Uh, Especially in the southern United States with Black people. And so I remember reading this book in high school. It was called Black Like Me. So
Black credit. Yeah.
a white man, had some kind of a chemical, some kind of he made his face black, and he experienced what it would be like to live as a Black
Right.
person in the southern United States for a certain number of months. And he realized the amount of discrimination there was. I mean, he had the same intelligence, he had the same socioeconomic, he had the same ability to talk with people, except his skin was a different color. And the racism that he encountered during that time propelled him to write the book about it. And because I read that book as a teenager, I became aware of the racism. I had no idea. I'm living in Canada, right? I mean, there's racism, but not, we don't have it at that extent. And so I dishabituated at that point. I became more aware. I became aware of the little things that people say, the little words that people would use that become so habituated in their vocabulary that they don't even realize that it's a put down for somebody else. Because I was able to step outside the box and sort of walk in somebody else's shoes by reading this book. And so that's one last thing that the authors say. We as people need to walk in other people's shoes so that we understand better what it feels like to be them, what it
Right.
feels like to have uh, the discrimination or the lack of money, the lack of finances, the lack of whatever that prevents them from having a fulfilled life.
Right. So, Fran, in all of this, give us hope.
I was talking to a friend of mine the other night, and she's probably watching this. She talked about how hard it is. Her brother, who was a former addict, okay, so he's a former addict. He has no fixed address. He has no income. He's not an addict anymore, but he doesn't have a driver's license. He doesn't have a birth certificate. He was a homeless person. In order for him to get the necessary social funding, social welfare systems, you have to have a phone so that they can phone you. You have to have an email address so they can contact you. You have to be able to use the system to apply for social assistance. They have none of that. So homeless people have none of the things that our government is forcing them to have so they can just apply for social assistance. So how can we, me and you, change that system? Because it's wrong. And we complain about tent cities. We complain about, oh, not in my neighborhood. We don't want tent cities in my neighborhood. But we're not doing a thing to help people get what they need to get into accommodation where they will be safe, where they won't be robbed of their wallet with their ID in it. We're not keeping them safe. What can we do as people?
Well, this is a loaded question, and I don't want to go into politics about this because I have very strong beliefs about that. But most of all, I think we need to help people more in not getting addicted. I think go back to the roots. Why did he end up on the street in the first place? Is that something we can do to prevent that? Now, we are in a housing crisis right now in Canada. I went to visit my son in Halifax, and he works for the city of Halifax. And they have one of the largest tent cities in there. Now, Halifax went above and beyond and they built shelters for these people. Unfortunately, a lot of them did not want to move because the new shelters did not allow them to shoot up. So I
Right?
think this is a much deeper issue than you and I are really equipped to discuss on here. So in all of this habituation and dishabituation, how can you give people through all of that hope today?
Yeah, what I would say, number one, is to make parents aware um, of their own biases, of their own habituation, of their own childhood upbringing, and how it will affect how they bring up their own children. Because, I mean, school systems can only do so much because 0 to 6, Marina, we know 0 to 6 is the most important age, and children don't start school until they're 5. So 0 to 6, how can we make young parents aware that every move that they make, everything that they say to their child, everything is being watched and it's being absorbed like a sponge. So if we can make young parents aware of how they're raising our children, we have a hope for the generation that's coming up that they won't be addicted or addicted to whatever it is.
Well, if you think of what does a child want from you, you and I work as hypnotherapists, and we, whenever a client comes to us and have a presenting issue, we regress them to go see what went wrong to cause that issue in childhood. Now, let's say, for example, it is addiction. 9 out of 10 times is I did not get the love and attention that I craved when they were a child.
Mhm.
So if we could just start as a society to give every child all the love and attention, be aware that they need them. And I know it's a far stretch, but there are so many beautiful people. I interviewed Brenda Miller last week, who wrote books about this, and what a beautiful vision to help to impact children and their parents to live a life to give them hope every single day from a young age. And when I was a young mother, I did so many things wrong because I did not have this knowledge. And knowledge gives you power, awareness gives you power. So if we can start young and instill all these beautiful I love yous and you are important, you are meant to be here. I know that Marissa Peer gave us a list of 66 things to tell your child. And I easily share that with clients that have young children so that we have the power. Each and every one of us has the power to empower children whenever, whether it's a grandchild or a child you see on the street, to make them feel I'm seen, I'm heard, I'm important, I matter.
Mhm. I belong.
Yeah.
I belong. So there's habituation and dishabituation. And if, number one thing, if we can keep, if we can talk to people rather than scrolling on our phone, that's first, right? Just make people important again. Make the person in front of you important enough that you will give them the time to say, you are so important to me that I will give my time to you, to listen to you, to
Mm.
hear you. I might not be able to solve your problem, but I see you and you're still important. You're worthy.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Well, Fran, thank you so much for educating us in habituation and dishabituation. And thank you, everybody who tuned in on whatever media you listened or watch us. And we will be back next week with more hope.
Bye-bye. Love you.